Hi everyone, welcome back. Today's notes are on the evidence of evolution. Geology is a really important factor to consider when we talk about evolution, but also when the early scientists were starting to form their theories about evolution. It's based on the idea that there's change in the earth over time. And Charles Lyell was a really important geologist. He proposed that there have been gradual observable changes that explain the current features that we see on Earth. And his ideas were used by Darwin because, remember, Darwin went to the Galapagos and he saw all these different geological features in different places that he went and saw how that impacted the organisms who lived there. And another important contribution of Charles Lyell was his estimate of how old the Earth was, and that it's been changing for such a long time, and that helped Darwin's ideas as well. Rocks are a key part of geology, and what they're able to tell us is relative age. So things that are closer to the surface, like up here in F, are going to be the youngest layers, and towards the bottom, those are our oldest layers. So this can let us compare when different organisms existed, because over time those dead organisms and other sediment rocks are going to pile on top of each other. This picture is not important for you to know, but it's basically showing the difference in our continent structure over time. So during the Permian period in 225 million years ago, most of the continents were connected or very close together, and this is known as Pangaea. And then over time, you can see that they started shifting and breaking up to what our globe looks like today. As I mentioned in the previous notes, evolution is a change in organisms over time, or the change in anything over time, but biological evolution specifically refers to living beings. So fossils are one of the key pieces of evidence we have for evolution. Fossils are the remains of organisms preserved in sedimentary rocks. So you can see here we have these outlines. Usually they're just impressions. The actual organic material like tissues, bones have broken down over time, and this is what is left as those dirt, which is sediment, layers harden over time. And this little creature I'm just going to point out here because he shows up on the SOL a lot. This is called a trilobite. He was a marine arthropod, very similar to a horseshoe crab, and he existed 250 to 500 million years ago. So many fossil questions are going to reference this guy because he is a good indicator fossil. Another piece of evidence that we look at is comparative anatomy. And anatomy is a study of similarities in structure and also their differences. Homologous structures, remember homo means same. In this case, we're talking about the same structure among different organisms that have different functions. So for this example down here at the bottom, we have a human arm, a cat leg, a whale fin, and a bat. You'll notice that the bones are color-coded. So we have very similar bone structure in each of these organisms, but they all perform different functions. Like a human arm is used for grabbing things, a whale fin for swimming, a bat wing for flying. But their similar structure lets us know that they likely had a common ancestor. Analogous structures are basically the opposite. They are structures in different organisms that have similar function but different structure. So for example, down here we have bat wing, bird wing, and insect wing. Even though they all perform the function of flying, they have very different structures. So we'll see different bone structure. Bats are going to have very thin skin that connects these bones, whereas birds are going to have feathers, and insect wings do not have that internal structure. They mostly just have these tiny veins that help keep everything working properly. And so this tells us that they might not share a recent common ancestor, but they could live in a similar environment. And vestigial structures are remnants of structures that were functional in ancestors. They're normally things that we can mostly live without today. A key example would be the appendix, which is located in the intestines. You've probably heard of people getting appendicitis, which is when you get an infection in the appendix and they take it out before it risks rupturing your intestines. And tailbone, since we no longer have tails, it's not really a necessary part of the spinal column. Comparative embryology looks at embryos, which are developing organisms. We can compare embryological development to also alert us if they have a common ancestor, because the genes that control embryologic development usually do not change very much. So if they have similar early structures like you see here, again, that's an indicator that they have a common ancestor. Comparative biochemistry is mostly related to DNA and other chemical features in the cell. The closer the evolutionary relationship between organisms, the more alike their DNA will be. And we know that DNA determines proteins, so they will also have very similar amino acid sequences. We've seen questions like this on the SOL before, where you are comparing the sequences and finding which ones are more similar. And that means that they're more closely related. And that is the end. So make sure you write your summary and a question and come get a stamp.